this edition of the Newsmakers, Colombians have voted to reject their government's deal with the FARC, throwing the peace process into disarray. We ask what happens next. Also in today's program, the U.S. Congress has approved a law that allows U.S. citizens to sue Saudi Arabia over alleged links to the 9/11 attacks. We discuss the law's impact on U.S.-Saudi relations. And in Picture This, a festival in Thailand that's not for the faint-hearted. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. The Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos says he will work with the opposition to try to salvage a peace deal with left-wing FARC rebels. The deal, which was the product of 4 years of intricate negotiations, was narrowly rejected by the Colombian people in a referendum on Sunday. Those who led the campaign to reject the deal said they were not voting for a return to violence, but that they believed the agreement was too lenient on the group, which waged a decades-long war against the state. Our newsmaker today is the Colombian peace deal, as we ask why it was rejected and we discuss what happens now.
Shock, tears, and disbelief. It was meant to be an historic moment. The end of a 52-year conflict that's claimed more than 220,000 lives. But Colombians have rejected a peace deal with the FARC by less than 60,000 votes.
The big cities where war didn't affect people as much, that's where this decision was made for the rest of the country. It says a lot about how selfish a big part of the country is.
Despite the result, we are still one nation, but this moment dashes any kind of hope.
Colombians are still trying to make sense of this incredibly tight result. Just days after the plebiscite on the peace deal, people on the streets have been debating the pros and cons of this final agreement with the FARC. But their differences in opinion also expose a far deeper political divide in the country.
For the other half of Colombians who voted, this result is cause for celebration. A chance to negotiate a better deal, to have peace, but with retribution. The referendum attracted a 37% voter turnout. 50.2% opposed the deal, while 49.8% were in favor. The no vote won throughout most of central Colombia, especially in the biggest cities. However, people in villages and rural areas, which were most affected by the civil conflict, largely voted in favor of the deal. People in the capital, Bogotá, also supported the deal. For those who voted no, this peace deal was too lenient, letting the guerrilla rebels effectively get away with murder. Under the agreement, the FARC would have become a legal political party and guaranteed 10 seats in Congress in the next 2 elections. The deal would also have allowed rebel leaders to avoid jail if they confessed their crimes, such as killings, kidnappings, human rights violations, and indiscriminate terror attacks. And that, for many Colombians, was too hard to swallow. This was a hard-fought-for peace deal, reached after nearly 4 years of negotiations. It's a major blow to President Juan Manuel Santos, who had pinned his legacy on ending the conflict. He made it clear there was no plan B if Colombians rejected this deal. But now that they have, all sides are scrambling to find one.
I will not give in. I will keep seeking peace until the last minute of my term, because that is the path to leave a better country to our sons.
The FARC maintains its willingness for peace and reiterates its position to use only words as weapons to work towards the future.
But what is the way forward now for Colombia? Will it get a second chance at its historic moment and finally achieve peace? Sandra Gatman, Bogotá, The Newsmakers.
We can now speak to Sandra Gatman, who's in Bogotá for us. Sandra, were Colombians as shocked as everybody else?
Absolutely. No one expected this result. All the polls suggested that the yes camp were going to win, and by a large and comfortable margin. The Colombian government have spent millions on their campaign to try to convince Colombians that this peace deal was a way to end the conflict and bring peace to the country. But that was absolutely not the case, and I think many are shocked, and they feel they've underestimated the power of the opposition and also the true feelings of Colombians that perhaps didn't show up on surveys before the plebiscite.
Yeah, talking about those true feelings, tell me what reasons those who voted no had and what they told you were their specific reasons for voting no.
There are many, Imran, and I think this is part of the problem. This is a very wide-ranging peace agreement. It's 297 pages long, and many people had very different qualms. But the biggest reason, I think, for the no camp was this issue of impunity. I've spoken to many people here on the streets of Bogota, but also in small rural towns where everyone assumed that those voters were going to vote yes. They have very raw memories of this conflict, and they are very uncomfortable with the reality that comes with this peace agreement that would not only see FARC commanders, mid-level officers as well within the guerrilla group escape jail time if they confess to their crimes, but they feel that they would be rewarded by being assured 10 seats in Congress over the next 2 years, regardless of how many votes they got in the electoral process ahead. So they feel that this is something of principle, whereas I think the yes camp are looking at it more pragmatically. They say that the no camp have effectively thrown the idea of peace out the window. They're risking war simply because they don't believe that FARC commanders are now going to bow to their demands to spend time in jail.
Okay, Sandra, thanks so much for that update and for setting us up for our debate. Sandra Gutman joining us there from Bogota. Well, joining me now from Barcelona is Christian Herbolzheimer. He's the director of the Transitions to Peace programs at Conciliation Resources, a UK-based consultancy. And from Bogota, I'm joined by Santiago Valencia Gonzalez, a congressman from the Democratic Center Party, who voted against the deal. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Congressman Santiago Valencia Gonzalez. As Sandra said, was impunity the main reason why you voted no, that you felt that criminals were getting away with their crimes?
Well, first, thank you for having me in your show. I'm really glad to be able to talk to you about this matter that is really important, not just for Colombia, but I think for the entire world. The first thing I want to say is that we all want peace. There's no one in Colombia that doesn't want a peace. What we think is that in that particular agreement, in that particular deal, was not peace. I mean, we were concerned about impunity. We were concerned about FARC don't giving the money they have of narcotics. There are millions of dollars, and not given the lands they have, and they take away from people that were working on the countryside. So the big matter was, of course, impunity, and because people saw the agreement as some kind of award for the guerrillas that has damaged so much our country.
Right. And Congressman, understandably, a lot of people have experienced a lot of pain. More than 200,000 were dead, thousands missing, a lot of people personally affected by the conflict. But just turning this around for just a second, we have 49.8% of people voting for the peace deal. And looking at some of the provinces, for example, Choco, one of the provinces hardest hit by the conflict, 80% of the voters there backed the deal. They wanted peace. And then the town of Bojaya, or Bojaya, if you like, where more than 100 people were killed when a church was hit by FARC mortar bombs, 96% of residents there voted yes. So in spite of their personal losses and in spite of their personal gain, they felt, hey, for the greater good, we need to vote yes and we want peace. Help me understand that. Help me understand why you've decided to say no, but those people, even though they were personally affected, decided to say yes.
Okay, there's people affected all around Colombia. I mean, not just in these places. We actually have big cities like Medellin or Bogota, because many people had to translate from countryside to our cities because of the violence. So many people that actually voted no also were direct victims from the violence in Colombia. So what I think is that maybe the government was like selling some kind of illusion about peace, but many people understood that the peace was not actually on this deal, but maybe otherwise. I mean, maybe this deal, and that's what we thought, because of the impunity, the money they were going to keep about narcotics and other things that are contained the agreement, we're going to produce more violence in the future. So all Colombians, directly or I mean, direct or not, we have been victims of violence. The big cities voted no. Maybe this was the difference, the small difference, because what we have is a divided country. But many people that has been victims from the violence right now are living in the cities because of the violence they lived in the past in the countryside.
Right. Christian Hobelsheimer, 50.2% of Colombians. It was very, very close, but the majority said they won't vote for this peace because this probably would be peace without justice. Is that accurate?
Well, trying to understand the reason for why so many people voted against the agreement, I trace it paradoxically to a success of many years of government public discourse, putting all the blame of violence and other problems in Colombia on FARC. This message has been consistently shared through government and public media since 2002 until very recently. So it's deeply, deeply embedded, and therefore the levels of not only mistrust but even anger, resentment, and hatred towards FARC are very strong. However, this is, of course, a partial picture of the reality, because violence has been committed by many other actors other than only FARC, including government officials and the armed forces. So that creates a situation where many people are hopeful that this was an opportunity to turning a sad page of the Colombian history for a better future for all. And while some were fearful of the change that could come, and I think honestly believed and were worried, like the senator just said, about the risk for impunity. However, I think in this agreement, then more than in any other before in the world, there's been much more attention to responding to the rights of victims to truth, justice, and reparation.
Okay, so let's take...
Not perfect, but much better than ever before.
Yeah, so let's take that first point that you made. Santiago Valencia Gonzalez, as Mr. Hobelsheimer says, is he right when he says that the government has had a coordinated campaign? I guess you can say ex-President Alvaro Uribe and others have had a coordinated campaign to convince Colombians that the majority of the violence came from FARC, and this is why they voted no.
Okay, I partially agree with what he said. FARC is not the only group we have, is not the only actual group that has committed violence in the present days, and that was one of the things people voted no, because government was, for us, they were saying a lie. They were saying that signing this peace process would be peace and would be the end of the conflict that we have in Colombia, and that's not even close to the truth. Even because of this government, we have now 2,100 acres of plantation of coke in Colombia, and as you know, one of the biggest reasons of violence in our country is because of the narcotics. So even if the FARC, supposing they're going to disappear from the scene of violence, there are going to be other groups. So many people thought it was too much for a small group of people that were committing violence against the real problem of violence. They thought even government was telling lies to the people, saying that this was going to be the end of the conflict of violence, just to give in a word for, I don't know, 20, 30, or 40 of the commanders of FARC's getting a prize for what they done. I don't agree with the professor about this being the best peace process for victims. If you see what happened with the paramilitary groups, they went to the jail from 5 to 8 years. They had to give all the money they have, and they have to confess all the crimes and repair the victims. There's nothing said about that in this particular agreement. Even one of the big concerns we had is that the reparation should be in this peace process by the government and not from those from the guerrilla.
Okay, so let's put that to Christian Hobelsheimer. Sorry to interrupt you, Christian Hobelsheimer. The paramilitaries, the right-wing paramilitaries of the government, they had 5 to 8 years. They lost everything that they had. The FARC guys are going to be sitting in Congress. Big difference, right? This is why people are so angry.
I think this is one of the reasons why people are so angry. And actually, let me put the emphasis on the real challenge looking forward now. We have a very deeply polarized society. And the challenge has a political dimension to it, trying to find a way out of this. It has a very important social dimension to it. Society divided by half means there's two very different and opposed perceptions and expectations of change to happen. And therefore there is indeed a need for a broadened sort of national dialogue to happen, because Colombia can only move forward if there's a joint vision for a future where there's a space for everybody. The reality is that the no has won, and that needs to be accepted now. And I think it's important to move forward. And looking forward, the importance, again, it's very encouraging to see the no campaign saying that they also want peace, they don't want to go back to war. That's a very good starting point. The second good starting point is that both the government and FARC have reiterated their commitment to the bilateral ceasefire. That's fundamental. And now the main factor is time. The current ceasefire is very fragile. The UN monitoring mechanism in place is not fully implemented. And unless there's a swift reframing of the peace process, the risk of violence, of external spoilers trying to create violence or other episodes is very high. Right. So things need to be reframed and reshuffled at the political level very quickly, and at the social level there needs to be a long, sustained dialogue between both sides.
Okay, that's just about it. Time-wise, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Santiago Valencia Gonzalez and Christian Hobelsheimer, thank you very much for joining us. Still to come in the Newsmakers, why the US president is worried about a new law for 9/11 victims. And in Picture This, an extreme demonstration of religious devotion at a festival in Thailand. For the first time under President Obama, the US Congress has voted to override a presidential veto. The focus of the political controversy is a law which allows families of people killed on 9/11 to take the Saudi government to court over its alleged links to the 9/11 attackers. President Obama says the law leaves the US vulnerable to similar lawsuits from other countries, and even some of the members of Congress who voted for it are now expressing reservations about whether it really was such a good idea. Randolph Nogel explains.
An attack heard around the world, and one which has left an indelible mark on the United States, its people, its foreign policy, and its financial capital, New York City. 15 of the 19 people involved in the 9/11 attacks were from Saudi Arabia. And 15 years later, some people are still asking questions over whether Saudi Arabia's government was involved, even after the release of 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 Commission report, which showed there was no smoking gun linking the Saudi government to the attack.
The US government agencies, with their tremendous responsibilities, have looked into this and have come to the conclusion that is very clear. There is no Saudi government involvement or involvement by Saudi officials in the events of 9/11. So I don't know how one can be more clear than this.
But even the most tenuous links have led to calls to allow victims' families to have their day in court against any state that may have sponsored the act. Now, new legislation will allow them to do that.
2/3 having voted in favor, the bill is passed.
The Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, or JASTA, allows U.S. citizens to pursue lawsuits against any foreign country for alleged involvement in terrorist acts on U.S. soil. U.S. President Barack Obama vetoed the bill, citing concerns that it could open the U.S. government up to lawsuits over its intelligence and military actions abroad. But both houses of Congress voted by an overwhelming majority to override his veto. The first time that's happened during the Obama presidency. Within hours of the vote, 30 senators signed a letter expressing reservations.
I think what we've seen in the United States Congress is a pretty classic case of rapid onset buyer's remorse.
Also at stake are relations with one of the U.S.'s most important allies in the region. Saudi Arabia's government has criticized the law, saying the erosion of sovereign immunity will have a negative impact on all nations. The U.S.-Saudi relationship is already under pressure, as the U.S.'s diplomatic thaw with Saudi's bitter rival Iran has changed the power dynamics of the region. A new law which would allow 9/11 victims' families to sue the kingdom is just the latest barb to emerge in what appears to be the fraying of a 70-year alliance. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Ali Al-Ahmed. He's a Saudi scholar and expert on Saudi political affairs at the Institute for Gulf Affairs. Ali, good to talk to you once again. So, Barack Obama said this was a mistake. CIA Director Brennan said this will have grave implications. What do you think? Was it a good idea for Congress to do this?
Well, this is not the first time the U.S. citizens are able to sue other governments. So I think there is a little bit of dishonesty on the part of President Obama and Mr. Brennan, who has very strong relationships with the Saudi monarchy. We all know that a few months ago, Iran was hit by a $2 billion lawsuit, and it was successfully completed. And Libya, as we know, with the Lockerbie, was also forced to pay billions of dollars. This is nothing new, where the U.S. citizens have sued other governments for terrorism charges and other even financial dealings. So, and the U.S. has even forced foreign governments, like the Germans and the Swiss government, to pay millions, if not billions of dollars for Nazi claims and so on. So this is not new. It hasn't affected the so-called international legal standards.
Okay, so let's put aside the potential legal blowback and that argument, and then ask if Saudi actually deserves this, because we had those 28 pages, they came out, and they were unredacted, and there really wasn't a smoking gun showing Saudi involvement in 9/11. So do the Saudis deserve being sued for 9/11 when they didn't have anything to do with it?
Well, it's very important to look into it, and I think the court system is a very good place to do that. As a senator from New York said, if Saudi Arabia, the Saudi government, the monarchy, had nothing to do with 9/11, they should not be worried. And anybody who is not committed a crime should not be worried about being taken to a court. Having said that, because of the U.S. government's successive administration, the Bush and Obama administration have left Saudi Arabia conduct its policy, terrorism continued to increase since September 11, not decrease. Let us focus on one thing. The Saudi government has never apologized or expressed regret that 15 of the 19 hijackers are Saudis. Instead, they accuse the senior government. Prince Naif, for example, said this is a Zionist conspiracy. These 15 Saudis were kidnapped and so on. So I think this is maybe a start to bringing pressure on the Saudis, and actually it will lead to decrease of terrorism, because let us be honest, the Saudi government has funded terrorist organizations before September 11 and continue to do so until today.
Okay, Ali Al-Ahmed, thanks so much for your thoughts. Now, if you're squeamish about needles, today's Picture This is probably not for you. We're going to Thailand, where a 10-day Taoist festival is underway, and it involves some very extreme rituals. Let's take a look. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.